Hello, and welcome to the Westeros.org discussion series on Game of Thrones from HBO. This episode, we're going to be discussing our views on Episode 2, Dark Wings, Dark Words. Linda will be providing the background material this time about the Reeds who were introduced this episode and sort of where they fit. The show really doesn't give you any sense of where they really belong. And I'll be dealing with both the highs and lows of this episode as we have some thoughts on that. The low in particular I have a lot of thoughts on.
For this week's background material, we're going to talk a bit about the Reed family, since Jojen and Mira Reed have now been introduced to the show. In the books they were actually introduced in Volume 2, Clash of Kings, but here they held them for this season. And, they are Crannogmen from the neck, and the neck is the narrowest part of the Westeros continent. That's where the north joins to the south, and it's a marshy, swampy area, which has led to people calling the Crannogmen frog eaters. They do actually hunt frogs as well. That's part of their diet, and they hunt frogs in the marshes and swamps. So they're often a little bit smaller than people on average, even the nobles, such as they are. And House Reed of Greywater Watch, a place that ravens can't even find because it moves around in the march. They are sworn to House Stark. They are ancient allies of House Stark, and when they show up in the books, they come to Winterfell to renew their old oaths of fealty, and these include swearing by ice and fire, among other things. Now, they have come, and this is the same on the show, they have come because Jojen, he has green dreams. He sees things about the future, and he knows he has to help Bran in some ways. So he's there to teach Bran about his own dreams, where he's seeing himself and the three-eyed crow. So they're going to be companions of Bran from now on. But what about House Reed then? What is their more recent connection to the Starks? Well, their father is Howland Reed, and Howland Reed, as they say, he wept when he heard about Ned's death, and he was in fact a companion of Ned's from the rebellion. They had met at the great tourney at Harrenhal, which in many ways set in motion the events of the rebellion, when Prince Rhaegar crowned Ned's sister Lyanna the Queen of Love and Beauty instead of crowning his own wife, Princess Elia of Dorne. So this is where the Starks, Ned in particular, ended up meeting Howland Reed, the little Crannog man. And Howland became a companion of Ned's and followed him in the war, and he followed him when Ned, as one of the last battles of the war, went to the Tower of Joy, as Prince Rhaegar called it, to challenge the three Kingsguard there. And it was Ned and 6 companions, among them Howland Reed, and Ned and Howland Reed were the only 2 who survived that fight. So Howland knows a lot of things, and he hasn't actually shown up yet in the novels, and George has said that eventually he will show up, and a lot of people are very much looking forward to it, because we feel that he can probably reveal quite a lot of things about what actually happened at the Tower of Joy. But until now, we're still guessing.
So let's talk about the highs and lows of this episode. It's a solid episode. I didn't really find anything really strongly stood out for me, personally. But I would say that probably the best and most interesting stuff for me was Jaime and Brienne's travels together. Nikolai Coster-Waldau and Gwendolyn Christie have great chemistry, and they're arguing and their disagreements, and Jaime constantly trying to find a weakness in her and trying to upset her came across really well. And I think, looking at having seen the 3rd and 4th episodes already, knowing a bit about what's to come, I think after the season is done, a lot of people are going to say that the Jaime and Brienne story is a central part of this season. So it was pretty good, and I can say for sure it gets better, the material, and the acting gets really, really interesting. Now the lows, this is a long one. It's Catelyn's speech with Talisa. Jace Lacob at the Daily Beast called it character assassination, or tantamount to character assassination. I think he was responding specifically to Catelyn saying at the end, in this very sort of Catholic guilt sort of way, that maybe all these tragedies have happened because I couldn't love a motherless child. And from his experience as a critic, and I just mine as a viewer, I'm just guessing that he hasn't really clarified, or I haven't seen his clarification, But a lot of viewers are going to take this very facile explanation and paint it, yes, it's all her fault. Never mind all the people who've actively done horrible things to the Starks. Never mind the part that Ned played in the downfall of the Starks by his failures to be pragmatic, by his insistence on being too honorable. People love to blame Catelyn. They love to blame Sansa as well, and there's a little trend of blaming sort of female Starks for the faults of the family, except Arya, who's a tomboy, so she doesn't really count. I could see that. I've seen it. I've seen posts already. Yes, it's all her fault. It flies a completely innocent of logic. It's not even what the writers are really saying. They're just showing her in a moment of sort of weakness and tragedy and upset, saying, you know, maybe questioning herself, like, are the gods doing this, and is it because of me? That said, people do latch onto it. People do. I think back to the first season where Bran kind of was complaining about where his mother was and how she had abandoned him, and I get, I know people are going to latch onto this and say Catelyn's horrible because she's abandoned her children. Never mind that Bran and Rickon have these strong walls and all these guards protecting them, while Robb Stark has very few people with experience of the politics of the South to advise and help him. I mean, the only reason they get across the other side of the river, the only reason they get the agreement with the Freys is because of her negotiation. She's the only one who really had the knowledge and the ability to handle Walder Frey. But to me, the real problem is at the start of that scene, where Talisa offers to help make this votive figure, and Catelyn says, no, only a mother can make it for her children. So when we hear the rest of the story, what this says to me is she made this for Jon because she accepted her obligation to Jon as a mother. She felt that she should be a mother to him. This means that she is a very bad mother because she doesn't end up doing the things a mother should do. She just recognizes, I have this obligation, but I'm not going to do it. It's completely different from what's in the novels. Completely different. Catelyn has been changed a lot from the first season on. They made her less ambitious. They made her much more of a overprotective mother figure who just wants to stay in Winterfell for kids and doesn't care about advancing them or seeing her daughter be a queen. Who wants to kill all the Lannisters, but keeps her mouth shut when there's a chance to kind of suggest Ned is gone. You can kind of see a hypocrisy that they've introduced to her, where she wants vengeance. We'll kill them all once we have our daughters back. My daughter's back, but then she has an issue with Rickard Karstark wanting vengeance, right? But this is something the writers have created. So in the novels, in the society she lives in, Catelyn has no obligation to Jon Snow as a mother, as a stepmother. He is Ned Stark's bastard. She is Ned's wife. She is the lady of the house, but she has no obligation to Jon. No one would expect her in the Seven Kingdoms. No one would think she's being a bad person for not wanting to have anything to do with the bastard that her husband has forced into the household against her wishes. She doesn't abuse him. She never beats him. She doesn't treat him like Cinderella. She doesn't do anything really. She basically says, "I'm keeping away from him. Ned can decide where he stays. Ned can decide how he's trained. Ned can decide where he eats. Ned can decide how much he interacts with our children. But Ned cannot decide for me whether I have anything to do with him or not." That's where she puts her foot down. It hurts Jon, but it hurts Jon because Ned has created the expectation by witnessing Catelyn with the other children that Catelyn should act like as a mother to Jon. But that's on Ned. For me, there's something about Catelyn's strength in that she says, fine, whatever, just don't make me part of it. And he paints her as a bad guy, but the story of Jon and Catelyn is really a story of the cruelty of Ned Stark towards both of them. And now, book readers believe they know why Ned does this, and it does mitigate a lot, but it doesn't change the fact that Jon and Catelyn don't know. In fact, part of the cruelty is that they don't know. He won't talk about some very important things. He won't explain himself to them. It's just, I say it's so, and it's so. You do it, do what I say. So, to me, when they put in this scene, like in isolation, it's a beautifully acted scene. I've never had an issue with Michelle Fairley's acting. and she does a beautiful. This is probably the best scene she's had in the show to date. But it in isolation and sort of without a sense of background, a sense of the setting that the show doesn't quite get across. They're probably trying to make her seem more sympathetic. But like, I don't think the Catelyn in the novels ever prayed to the gods for Jon to die. So are they really making her more sympathetic by having that story? I don't think it works. So Catelyn in the books is a very different character in a lot of ways. There's some fundamentally similar things. There's some superficially very similar things as well, but they've changed a lot of things that made her very complicated, and they've simplified her a lot, and they've made her, to me, a much less interesting character. So now people are talking, oh, we're doing it for sympathy. Well, I don't want sympathy necessarily. I want people to understanding. I want people to understand the situation. I want people to see how complicated and difficult the situation is for those characters. The other thing I don't understand, of course, is she brings up this whole issue of his illegitimacy, and yet they had a perfect opportunity in the first episode to have Jon himself bring it up if they followed the books more for his explanation. So it is a little odd miss, I think, on their part, but that's neither here nor there. So that's my big issue. Catelyn, since first season, they've been doing their own thing with her. I think they've been reducing her as a character. They've been diminishing her. They've taken away some of her self-determination, where she makes choices for herself. I said, no, she's tricked by Littlefinger and Tyrion to release Jaime. It's not her own decision for very good reasons, I think. She's silent when she talks in the books. She wants things that she doesn't want in the books. It's not the character I love so much, and I think is the perhaps one of Martin's greatest creations. I mean, everyone loves Tyrion. Tyrion is such a vivid character. He's so charming and witty and clever. He's the underdog. All these things. But Catelyn, to me, is the one who feels like has such psychological and emotional depth, who feels such a part of a setting, who isn't the most brilliant or the bravest or the most skilled in arms or any of these things, but she feels the most grounded in that setting and feels the most real. So I hope we come to a point in time where I won't have to kind of be bothered by it anymore, and we'll see what the future brings. But right now, yeah, Catelyn is a sore point with me, and the episode would have been better in my estimation if we just didn't have that scene, no matter how well acted. I know a lot of TV viewers have a very different impression of her, and so it works fine for them, and that's fine. The TV viewers outnumber the book readers, but TV viewers aren't getting the character that's in the book. They're getting a very different character.
And that was all for this week's bonus materials from Westeros.org. We'll be back again next week to discuss episode 3, which is called Walk of Punishment.